The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
The phone rang while I was still wearing my service gear. "Ma'am, your stepfather is here. He has an industrial grinder," Thomas told me. For a second, everything went completely silent. I wasn't frightened. It was just that I had been waiting for that exact sentence for years. I could see him in my mind, standing by that shipping box downtown. I could picture his face looking tight and his hands shaking because he felt he was entitled to everything. He was sure that whatever my father had left behind belonged to him right now. I didn't yell. I just took a breath, smiled, and checked the time. "Let him grind, Thomas," I said. "He just triggered the 72-hour security protocol my father established. Drop a comment and tell me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. I really want to know who is part of our group on this path to justice." I didn't lose my cool. Being scared is a luxury for people who aren't ready. In naval intelligence, being unready is a death sentence. I sat down at my desk. The blue light from the high-tech screen hit my eyes as I typed in the command to take control. Most folks think a shipping container is just a metal box. My stepfather thought that. He believed that if he used enough heat and force, he would get inside to grab the $14 million my father earned with his own sweat. He was dead wrong. That container was a digital and physical fort. It was lined with 2 layers of a special metal that could stay shut for days, even if someone tried to break in. I knew what the neighbors were saying. Back in Savannah, people thought I was the cold, distant daughter. They thought I let a predator walk right into my mother's life and steal everything from our family. They saw my silence during the wedding as a sign that I had given up. They thought it was a sign of weakness when I didn't complain as my stepfather started moving things around in our house. But in my line of work, being quiet is how you prepare. It is the pause you take before you start an ambush. I had been watching them for a long time, acting like I was just a part of their version of a family. I watched as he used my mother's sadness to feed his own greed. I didn't give her a warning, and I didn't fight him when he first moved in. I just kept my eyes open. In the intelligence world, we call this baiting the kill zone. You don't try to stop a predator when he first shows up. You let him get fully involved. You wait until he has walked so deep into the trap that his only way out is to tell the whole truth. I didn't have any kindness left for him. He had used it all up months ago. He thought my time in the military had made me too stiff to notice what was going on. He didn't realize it had actually turned me into a living record book. This is what I call survivalist silence. It's the understanding that you don't have to fight every small battle. You just pick the one that finishes the whole war. Every time he asked about my father's bank accounts or looked for a secret will, I wrote it down. Every time he told my mother to sell my father's things to make life easier, I noted what he was trying to do. My anger wasn't loud. It was scientific. It was just a bunch of data on a protected screen. I finally saw that he was selling a lie, and I was the one paying the bill. It was time to cancel that deal. As the lockdown started, I looked at the video feed from the docks. I could see the bright sparks from my stepfather's machine in the thick Georgia fog. The light showed his face, and he looked desperate and greedy. He looked tiny. He looked like an amateur trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't understand. He didn't know that my father had planned for this exact moment. My father always said that if you love someone, you don't leave them with a mess. You leave them with the truth. My computer screen showed a different kind of beginning. It was filled with facts, numbers, and quiet payback. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a financial check. This wasn't about getting even. It was about counting the costs. I had 72 hours to get to Savannah. By the time I landed, my stepfather would have to pay back every cent he owed. I didn't close my eyes at all on the flight to Savannah. I watched the coastline pass by under the wing of the plane. The gray and deep blue lines below looked exactly like the data I had been checking for hours. My father had built a massive business on that coast worth $30 million. He made it out of iron and salt water with a level of toughness that a man like my stepfather couldn't even pretend to have. My father's hands were like a map of his hard work. They were rough and scarred from years of working on the Atlantic. By contrast, my stepfather's hands were soft and clean. He only used them when he was reaching for something that didn't belong to him. He showed up in my mother's life less than a year after the funeral. He introduced himself as Jackson, acting like a quiet widower who understood her sadness. He walked into our home carrying flowers and acting very respectful, but I saw the way his eyes looked at the expensive wood floors while he gave my mother a shoulder to cry on. To my mother, he was a lifesaver. To me, he was just a ghost in a cheap suit, a shadow stretching over everything my father had created. I remembered sitting on the back porch with my father just a few weeks before he died. He was a quiet man. He believed that words were often just noise meant to distract people from what someone really wanted. He told me then that some things shouldn't stay in the house because they are too important to be misunderstood. I used to think he was just being paranoid when he gave me a heavy brass key and the coordinates to a container at the far end of the docks. Now I realized it was his final way of protecting us. This was my father's way of making sure things were right. My father had noticed my stepfather hanging around long before I did. He saw how this man looked at our money and our family history while my father was still alive. He could have stopped it back then, but he chose a different path. He left that container as a final test for me. It was a place where I would have to learn how to defend our family myself. He knew that if he just gave me money, my stepfather would eventually find a way to steal it. But if he gave me a secret and a fortress, I would have to become the officer he raised me to be. My stepfather had spent months telling my mother that I was being distant. He told her that my job in naval intelligence had made me too secretive and difficult. He told her that my father's business was a burden and that she should sell everything for her own peace of mind. He thought he was isolating her, but he was actually just giving me a very clear map of his greed. Every lie he told was something I saved. Every time he tried to trick her, it was like a debt he didn't know he was building up. The $14 million in that container was the liquid heart of my father's $30 million business. It wasn't just a number on a page. It was proof of how much my father had planned ahead. My stepfather thought using a grinder was his way to get rich quick. He didn't understand that he wasn't just breaking into a box. He was breaking into a trap designed by a man who had spent his whole life watching the tides. My father didn't leave me a mess. He left me the truth. And it was time for the final audit. My stepfather was a professional at what he did. He didn't just enter my mother's life. He carried out an attack while making it look like he was helping. He called himself Jackson, which is a name so typical that it almost worked like a disguise. My father always told me that a person who uses a very common name is usually trying to hide something specific about their past. From my desk, I had already started a basic check on him. This man named Jackson didn't seem to be in any public files before 2013. He was a digital ghost who had made up a personality using fake kindness and borrowed sadness. He used my mother's status as a widow like a tactical opening. My mother was fragile. She was a woman whose whole life had been held steady by my father's quiet power. When Dad died, that support was gone, and she was left floating in a world that was too quiet. My stepfather offered her a way out. He was the one who held her hand during those long, lonely Sunday afternoons. He was the person who told her it was time to move on from the past while his eyes were busy counting the silver and looking for a safe in the room. But his most dangerous move wasn't his charm. It was the way he started to change our family history. He began putting bad thoughts into my mother's mind. Using my military uniform as a wall between us, he told her that my time in the service had made me too cold and secretive. He made my father's choice to leave me in charge of the shipping container look like Dad didn't trust her. Why would Robert hide $14 million from his own wife? He would ask her, acting like he was very worried. Unless your daughter told him you weren't able to handle the family business. It was a perfect example of gaslighting. He was the one looking for a payout, but he made me look like the thief. He convinced her that I was keeping family money at the base and using Dad's hard work to pay for a secret life she wasn't part of. He made my professional silence look like a criminal plan. By the time I got that call from the docks, He had already made my mother believe that breaking into that container wasn't a crime. He told her it was an act of fairness. He told her he was doing it for her to find the money she was being kept from. I watched her face through our weekly video calls, and I saw her change. The warmth I had known my whole life was being replaced by a scared and painful feeling. She didn't look at me like her daughter anymore. She saw me as an obstacle to the safety my stepfather promised. He was always there, standing just outside the camera's view. He was a predator acting like a protector. He thought he had successfully cut me off. He didn't realize that in the world of intelligence, we don't just watch the target. We watch the people the target tries to change. Every lie he said to her was something I saved. Every trick was a reason for his downfall. He thought he was playing for a house and a box. I was playing to put him in jail. I landed in Savannah just as the morning fog started coming off the ocean. The air was thick and smelled like salt and fuel. It used to feel like home, but now it was a zone for a mission. I didn't drive to the house. Going there would have been a mistake because it would give him a chance to act like a worried husband. Instead, I drove to a plain office to meet my father's old friend. This man had been a federal investigator for 28 years and was my father's best friend since they were kids. He didn't give me a hug. He gave me a folder. In our world, information is the only thing that matters. Your father was a lot of things, Jesse, but he was never a fool, the investigator said, his voice sounding very dry. He kept records of everyone this man talked to before Dad even got sick. He knew a predator when he saw one. We spent the next 3 hours checking the doc videos against the man's digital history. It was a perfect example of someone being both dumb and arrogant. My stepfather had been paying 2 dock workers to look the other way while he tried to break in. Paying off staff in a trade zone is a federal crime. I saved the videos of him giving them cash and the statements from the manager. This wasn't a family fight anymore. It was a real criminal case. While the investigator worked on the federal report, I started the money attack. I used my power as the person in charge of my father's trust, which started the moment Dad passed away. I called the head of security at our main bank. I didn't ask if I could do it. I showed the proof of the break-in and the fraud. I didn't cry and I didn't ask why he did it. I just opened my laptop and started clicking restrict. In 12 minutes, every bank account he shared with my mother was locked. My kindness was something he had used up for months while he thought I was too busy with my service to notice him stealing. He was about to find out that my bank was closed and his credit was worth nothing. My anger wasn't loud this time. It was scientific. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a business check. I rubbed my eyes and tried to feel bad, but I only felt clear. I felt a cold sense of power as the status on my screen changed from active to restricted. My stepfather thought the grinder was his way into my father's life. He didn't know that in my world, we don't just build walls. We build legal traps that close around the target before they even hear the alarm. I wasn't the daughter watching from the base anymore. I was the officer carrying out a mission to destroy his entire reality. I sat in the quiet light of the investigator's office. The sound of my military laptop was the only thing breaking the silence of the morning. I typed in the last secret code, the one my father had practically whispered to me through his careful records. The digital lock on that shipping container didn't just open, it completely gave up. For years, my stepfather believed that the box held $14 million in cash and expensive jewels. He was right about the money, but he was dangerously wrong about everything else. He thought the money was the prize. He never saw that the money was just the bait. As the files opened on my screen, a name from the past appeared. It was Summit Freight Group. A cold feeling of truth hit me. Back in 2011, my father's company almost went under. A fake company had stolen nearly $10 million through a bunch of fake shipping papers and shell accounts. My father survived it, but the stress made him look 10 years older in just one winter. He spent the rest of his life writing down everything about that betrayal, just waiting for that ghost to show up again. I looked through the scanned IDs and the original contracts hidden in the secret vault. There he was. It was a younger version of the man who was currently trying to use a grinder to steal my father's life work. My stepfather wasn't just a guy looking for a rich widow. He was a criminal returning to the place where he committed a crime 12 years ago to finish what he started. He didn't marry my mother for the house. He married her because he knew my father had kept the receipts, the original papers that could put him in federal prison for the rest of his life. This wasn't a family problem anymore. It was an old criminal case being closed with perfect timing. My father hadn't left me a box of junk. He had built a digital trap for the man who tried to destroy him. My stepfather thought his machine was a tool for freedom. He didn't understand that every spark it made was like a signal telling me exactly where he was in the trap. I looked at the screen, seeing the digital signatures that matched the man sitting in my mother's living room. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the numbers. I had been watching him act like a family member while he built up a debt of lies. Now the check was due, and the interest was growing every second. I shut my laptop and stood up. My uniform felt like a suit of armor. The investigator looked at me with a tough expression. "You ready?" he asked. I felt the brass key in my pocket. It was the one that would actually open the box and show the truth he wanted to destroy. "The file is verified, Marcus," I said. My voice was flat and calm. "I'm not just ready, I'm lethal." I wasn't going to wait for the 72-hour timer to run out. I had seen enough. It was time to send that ghost from 2011 back where he belonged. The ocean air felt cold as I walked up the driveway of the house where I grew up. I didn't knock. It was my father's house. The locks I had changed earlier that morning opened for my code with a quick click. Inside, the house was silent, except for the quiet sound of people talking in the living room. My stepfather was acting like he owned the place. He was holding a glass of my father's 25-year-old bourbon and leaning back in my father's favorite leather chair. My mother sat across from him. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked tired. "It's for the best, Alina," my stepfather was saying. He sounded like he was trying to be helpful. "Once we get the money out of that container, we can move away from this place. We can start fresh without all this military secrecy holding us back." I walked into the living room light. "I'm afraid the fresh start just got canceled, Jackson," I said. My voice was very steady, like a knife cutting through his fake kindness. He jumped, and the bourbon spilled over his glass. The look of surprise on his face lasted for only 3 seconds before he tried to look mean. "Jesse," he said as he stood up, "you're making a scene. This is a family matter. As your mother's husband, I have a right to take care of our things." I didn't say a word. I walked to the table and put down my high-tech tablet. I pressed play. The screen showed a very clear video from the docks. There he was. His face was full of greed and sweat as he struggled with that grinder against the thick steel of the box. The sound was loud, the noise of metal hitting metal and him cursing when a security light he didn't know about started flashing. My mother gasped and put her hand over her mouth. She was watching her husband act like a common criminal. My stepfather's face turned from pale to a dark purple. "That's a violation of my privacy," he yelled. "No," I told him. "That is a federal crime in a shipping zone, but we aren't done yet." I dropped a heavy folder on the table. The Summit Freight Group logo was right on top. 2011, I said. "That was the year you stole $10 million from my father. He spent 12 years waiting for you to come back for the rest. He didn't put $14 million in that container to hide it. He left it there as bait for the man who tried to ruin him." His confidence disappeared instantly. He looked at the folder, then at the tablet, then at the door. He was a predator who just realized he was already in a cage. He started to move, trying to find a way to talk his way out of it. But I held up my father's last letter. "This is for you, Mom," I said, giving the envelope to her. "Dad knew. He knew you would be lonely, and he knew a man like this would use that to get inside. He didn't want to boss you around. He wanted to make sure you could choose the truth." As my mother started to read the letter, the sound of police sirens began outside. The local police, along with Marcus and the federal agents, didn't have to break in. I had already left the door open. This wasn't a family fight anymore. It was the end of every lie he ever told. The power had shifted completely. He wasn't the husband or the protector. He was a criminal on a property I was legally protecting. He was a mistake that was about to be erased. Justice isn't always like a poem, but in Savannah, it felt like the salt air and a finished job. The man who spent 12 years hiding from his crimes didn't get to act charming in a federal courtroom. The evidence from 2011, kept perfectly in that $14 million container, was what finished him. He was charged with fraud, theft, and damaging property. The house my father built is quiet now. The feeling of being tricked is gone, replaced by the normal sound of the ocean. My mother finally found her own voice again. It took some time. She realized that being lonely wasn't a weakness, but a place she could fill with her own power. We opened the container together using the key I had kept safe. Inside, we didn't just find money. We found my father's presence in every file and every word he wrote. I didn't keep that money to buy fancy things. That wasn't the goal. I started the Robert Legacy Fund. It's a group that helps pay for training and school for the kids of the dock workers who were loyal to my father for 35 years. It's how I make sure his hard work lasts longer than the greed of men like my stepfather. Standing at the edge of the docks and watching the sun come up over the water, I finally felt the weight of my uniform get lighter. My mission was over. This brings me to a message I want to give to you. This is for anyone who has ever felt like they didn't belong in their own family. For the ones standing in the background while others took the attention. Maybe people call you difficult or stiff because you have boundaries. I want you to know that your silence isn't giving up. It is a safe place. Protecting your peace isn't selfish. It is honorable. When you set a limit, you aren't just closing a door on someone toxic. You are opening a door to your own life. You deserve a life that isn't just about giving kindness to people who don't see your value. My father taught me that the truth doesn't need a crowd to be real, and justice doesn't have to be loud to last forever. You are the boss of your own history. Don't let anyone with a grinder tell you otherwise. Savannah has a lot of ghosts, but today, looking at the water, I only see things clearly. I can feel my father smiling in the wind. It's a quiet sign that the house is safe. The records are balanced. The job is done. If my story gave you the strength to stand up for yourself, please share it. Follow us for more stories about justice.